Hey, songwriters, welcome back to At Home Songwriting. Today, I have a very special guest. Natalie Fideler is my guest here. She is a singer, songwriter, performer from Minnesota, here where I'm based. And we're going to talk to her about her music, her songwriting, and just kind of how she puts everything together. So, Natalie, welcome to At Home Songwriting.
Hey, Chad, thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you because I've been listening to your music for quite some time. It's funny how I actually discovered you. We were actually at like a meet and greet VIP thing with the singer JoJo,
Mhm.
and you got to ask her a question. Do you remember what you had asked her?
I sure do. And it's mostly because whenever I'm in a meet and greet like that, and I'm going to ask a question and I want to remember what they're going to say, I record it on my phone as a voice memo. So I
Oh,
have like the whole
awesome.
thing recorded on my phone right now, so I won't pull it up. But I do remember it was like, a COVID-ish meet and greet where like we got to all ask
Yes.
questions, but it was in front of everyone. It wasn't like a one-on-one, like shake hands, take a picture situation.
Yeah.
And I was like, I gotta ask a question. This is my chance. I just gotta do it. I love JoJo so much. And I asked her what advice she would give to aspiring singer-songwriters. And she kind of let me plug my stuff in front of everyone. And clearly that is how you found my music. And thank goodness
Totally.
for that, because this is awesome. But yeah, I asked about advice for aspiring singer-songwriters, and I think what she said was a lot about like making sure to protect your the rights to your music and read the fine print and all that stuff so you don't get in a nasty contract somewhere.
Yeah. Well, for those of you watching who aren't familiar with JoJo, she was very successful on a label that basically kind of her contract, they basically held her hostage for like 10 years where she couldn't use her name, she couldn't release music. So yeah, she was very much focused on how to protect yourself. She's probably like,
Yeah.
first thing, don't do what I did.
Yeah. But yeah, it was great to just, yeah, talk to her and hear her play, and something came out of it, if nothing other than a great night. Now we're here. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So how would you describe the music that you make? Like if people ask you what's your style, like how do you explain that?
that's a great question. And I'm still working on the answer. But the one that I've kind of arrived at lately is my music is, I guess I've been calling it like nerd rock,
Okay.
which kind of brings some certain bands to mind. But in my definition of it, it's like it's kind of nerdy, kind of intellectual, but it's also like kind of rock and roll, kind of scrappy at the same time. It's
Yeah.
got a little bit of that like full band oomph to it, wall of sound, but also the more thoughtful and intimate stylings of a singer-songwriter kind of all at once. Um,
Well, well, I
yeah.
was I was I was telling you before we got started that, when I listen to your music, it's very lyrical and it's very much creative and almost there's almost a little sass or like a little bit of sort of like humor that's added in, but then you
Mhm.
also have this very like you said sort of indie rock sort of backing tracks and stuff too. So it's like thought provoking and fun at the same time. And I think what's funny is when people don't understand musicians, like one of the hardest questions to answer is describe your music. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
even trying because I'm the same way. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What
Totally.
are you?
Especially because like when you write something, it's like, at least for me, it's just kind of like, I'm gonna write a thing and it kind of comes out. If I have
Yep.
like a prompt or a thing that I'm writing to, I can do that. But like for most of the time, it's like I just kind of like walk over to the piano or my guitar and just kind of like note vomit. And it's like, oh, this is kind of indie rock. And I'm cool with that. Just kind of letting
Yeah.
it lead me.
But if you took, but what's interesting though is it's sort of indie rock, but yet you have a strong, like a very pop sensibility at the same time. Like your structure is very organized like pop music, but it's definitely not your everyday pop. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I
that's
would
kind of how I
totally
experience
agree.
it.
For a while, I was calling my music alternative pop, which I think is like also very close, but maybe not quite there. Because again, when you hear alt pop, it kind of calls to name like artists like, I don't know, Billie Eilish or almost like Panic at the Disco, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And those are like, you know, great artists with great music, but doesn't really sound like my music. So I've kind of stopped using that term. But I feel like
Yeah.
when I was saying alt pop, it was kind of like this is like a pop structure done in an alternative way, you know?
Yeah. No, that's true because I think if you do look up alt pop, you get Billie Eilish, you get some of these more contemplative type singer songwriters. There's a little bit of a darker tinge, and I don't hear your music as having the dark tinge, even though you touch on some heavy things.
Hmm.
It's not quite as it's not the same thing. So maybe you're like indie pop rock or but
Yeah.
you're Natalie. That's what it
Yeah.
is.
Totally.
Who have been your influences?
Ooh. Well, I am a Beatles head, born and raised. Both my parents were huge Beatles fans, and so the Beatles were my first favorite band. And um, yeah, they are just on a pedestal in my mind that I they will always be there. Um,
Cool.
I also really, really loved Liz Phair.
Okay.
And I just love what she has done as a songwriter and just kind of like what she represents in the industry as kind of one of the first people to make like bedroom pop tapes. And just the what she's done for indie music and all that stuff and the fact that she's still going. Like I got to see her perform for the very first time ever in November of last year. Um, and that was like the best night of my life. I cried through the whole concert.
Oh, awesome.
It was so good. Um, but I grew up in like the 2000s pop punk era. So Good Charlotte, Green Day, Fall Out Boy, Paramore, Simple Plan, like the list goes on. Those were like my everything growing up. And there's definitely you can hear that influence in my music for sure.
It's funny that you actually brought up Paramore because I was going to mention that. And then, sometimes you want to tell someone your music has an influence or it sounds like something. And then you're like, but am I right about that? But it's awesome
Uh-huh.
that you said Paramore because I definitely hear that,
Hmm.
especially from like a melodic perspective, kind of how you're doing your song. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I love that you hear that because I love Paramore. And
Awesome.
I love that their music is again, it's like it's poppy, but it's also kind of rocky, but it's also a little funky. It's got all these different
Yeah.
elements kind of rolled into one, but it's still very much like a fully baked presentation at the end of it still.
So I know you started to mention, you start with piano, start with guitar. Do you have a certain process that obviously we know songs come from different places. So sometimes you probably have a lyric idea, sometimes you have music ideas. Do you have sort of a way that you write or what's your process look like?
Yeah, great question. I've got a couple different ways that things come about. The biggest one I would say is thinking of lyrics and like kind of like while I'm thinking of the lyrics, also just kind of hearing a melody go with them. Um, I
Cool.
don't know if that's just like an amazing thing that my brain does or if it's something that I've picked up and like learned along the way, but like kind of just knowing like the cadence of the way that words flow and the way we speak them, like they kind of make a rhythmic sense and thusly like a melodic sense comes with that for me. And so a lot of times my songs have started with me like driving while like singing to myself or like taking a walk or doing the dishes or something random like that where I'm
Yeah.
kind of thinking about it, but not really. I'm kind of on autopilot too. And from there, it's like taking that melodic and lyrical idea and harmonizing it when I get to my instrument. Um,
Cool.
and so that's one way. The other way is like starting with a riff or a chord progression or something musical at my instrument that I really, really like, and then trying to sing over it and come up with a vocal melody. So kind of like coming at it from both sides.
So do you have a band that you play with on the regular or what does that look like for you?
I do. I have a trio, so one bassist and a drummer that join me on stage. And yeah, pretty much most of my gigs, unless like I state like this is a solo thing, is going to be my band. And it has been a great pleasure to work with them. My drummer is actually my spouse, Lee
Oh,
Underwood. And so that's super fun because like whenever I have a musical idea, I just like run up to her and I'm like, hey, listen to this voice memo. Hey, let's go downstairs and play this thing. Let's, it's so great, especially since she likes my music and likes to
Awesome.
play with me. It's great. I love her. And then my bassist, Tyler Malmberg, is a friend of mine that I met in music school actually when we were in college. Um,
Cool.
and yeah, I have just loved gigging with him and playing music with him since we met, and we have a really good
Where did
chemistry.
you go to music college?
I went to Concordia College up in Moorhead, Minnesota, and I
Oh, sure.
studied classical composition. Um,
Okay.
and so that's like a really big side of my music writing that like I kind of I love that part of me, and but I also kind of keep it under wraps um
Yeah.
to some degree because I worry that if I say that like I'm kind of a classical musician, that it will off-put some people. So that's kind of where like the nerd in nerd rock is like
Got
slipped
it.
in, but just like subtly.
Well, I was going to ask you how do you feel that that influences the way that you write? Like, where does that come in to the process?
Yeah. I definitely feel it in my chord progressions and like harmonic structures for sure. Um, I love a good chromatic bass line. I put one in like every song. I try to do it tastefully, but like if you go through my songs, like every single one, you'd be like, okay, there it is. Okay, next.
Now we have
Um,
Easter eggs to go look for.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. Um, and then I think just some of like the phrasing of um like every once in a while having less than 8 bars, more than 8 bars, or
Sure.
not being afraid to throw in an odd meter somewhere or that
Cool.
kind of stuff.
I think that's the way to take education, right? Is to sort of know it, but know when to like sort of throw it in and when not to. It's sort of like people going to school for like cooking or being a chef or culinary, I guess is what you would call it.
Mhm.
You really know how to make the fancy stuff, but do you really make everything fancy? Like sometimes you
Mhm.
just want mac and cheese.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
um, so obviously working with your spouse, she's the drummer. Is it kind of a co-writing situation, or is it more like how would you play on this song, or is it a little bit of both, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, great question. All my songs I like to write start to finish by myself. Um, and that writing is usually just my voice and the whatever instrument I'm like writing it on or feeling it on. Usually
Yeah.
either guitar or keys. Um, and like making a demo of it, just that. Just my voice and the primary instrument, start to finish, double bar line at the end. This is where it starts, where I want it to go, how it ends. Um, and then sending that off to my collaborators and then having them listen to it, get kind of a feel for it, maybe give them some guiding options or like things that I'm hearing, like, oh, I want a halftime in this section, or I want a really
Yeah.
big fill here, or, little things. But then as we jam on it, kind of letting their voice on their instrument come out. I think of myself kind of like the music director of Natalie
Cool.
Fideler.
That's cool.
And I think that our collaboration, I guess I would say it's more like orchestrational collaboration rather than like the actual composition of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Um, are you gigging full time? Like, is music what you do full time for a living? And I know that's kind of a loaded question for
Mhm.
musicians. Like, just know that if you say no, I don't do music full time, like that's 100% okay because doing it full time has no bearing on quality or what you're doing. So, do you do music full time?
I do music full time, but I
Awesome.
don't do like the Natalie Fiddler original project full time.
Got
Um,
it.
so this is like obviously a big component of who I am and what I do. And I see kind of everything else that I do as like I'm doing all that to like put food on my table and pay my rent and whatever, but I'm also doing that so that I have some money to do the Natalie Fiddler solo project, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I teach music lessons 4 days a week at Blue Tree Music Education in South Minneapolis. And I take odd gigs, cover stuff, when I can. I also do a little bit of music engraving work, like notating and finale and stuff. And
Oh,
I
cool.
really love to do that more technical side of stuff too.
So there's the classical part comes in there. That's awesome.
Yeah. Hmm.
So let's go back then, rewind. We talked about, your parents were into the Beatles and stuff. When you started writing songs, like when did that appear in your life?
It was a really early thing for me, honestly. It was something that I don't think I ever really like thought about or made a conscious decision of like, I'm gonna write music today. It was just kind of a thing that I did. Um, I think the first time I ever like wrote something was when I was little and my older sister was at school, but I wasn't old enough to be at all day school. And I like sat down at the piano and like wrote just like an easy little like Black Key song about how I missed my sister. But
Wow.
like it was just like I was young and I was just like it was like maybe two measures long, just repeating the same thing. But like I just it was like I felt something and I ran to the piano and I sat down and I made a song. Um,
Were you taking lessons? Like, did you take piano lessons and
mhm.
things like that? Is that where kind of that came from?
Yeah, I took lessons in like so many different things when I was younger. It started with Suzuki violin when I was like super young.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't stay in violin for long. I switched to piano really soon after that. I want to say I was in piano lessons by the time I was in kindergarten or something like that. And I stayed in piano for a few years, and then I ended up taking drum set and percussion lessons. Um, and I was in like band and orchestra and jazz band and all that stuff on drums and percussion. I was like a drummer for like the first 15 years of my life. And
Awesome.
while I was doing that, I ended up um, kind of half teaching myself how to play guitar, half learning from my dad, who is a huge self-taught guitarist, who is like really, really good for someone who is self-taught. Like he's really good. Um, and then I took voice lessons too. I was just kind of all over the place as a kid, but I knew that it was always music. It was the thing that I
Awesome.
wanted to learn about and try and experiment with. And
So, like, I was just thinking about that too. Like, when I listen to your music, there is sort of a jazzy tinge to it as well. Did you study like sort of jazz vocals when you were in school, or does that just kind of come out from what you like to listen to?
um, I studied jazz singing for like a blip in the timeline. And it was more so like I tried a jazz song at one point in voice lessons. Um,
Okay.
but I did study jazz and play in a jazz band on both drum set and guitar. So I think it's a little more harmonic the way that my jazz stylings kind of come through
Yeah.
in my writing, harmonically and like rhythmically for sure.
So, I know one of the songs, and I don't remember the title right now, but what I love about your writing is you're sort of not afraid to say things sort of very directly and about things that you don't necessarily hear in songs. Like one of your songs is about keeping nude photos on your phone or something,
Yeah.
which is such a great like it's such a great concept. Like I was just like awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that song, I think you're thinking of Power Move. And that was
Yes.
one of the few songs that I've released as a single, but then never put on a record. There's only two of them that I have like released as singles, but not on a record. And yeah, Power Move was like I had just broken up with a guy and I was like, I don't know, I was just in this mood where it was like kind of angry that I gave that part of myself to someone that I was now like kicking out of my life, right? And it was like this
Sure.
reclamatory sense of like, you know what? I took nudes, I sent them, but you know what? I still have them and you don't. You know, if that makes sense. Like a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fuck you, my sexuality is mine. I don't know if I can swear on your YouTube
Yes,
channel.
you can. You can.
Okay, thank goodness. But yeah, yeah, I love yeah, yeah, the like what was yours at one point, it's really mine, and I'm taking it back now.
Yeah. Well, I actually, so it's funny because I have a friend who actually just broke up with someone,
Mhm.
and she basically like had reached out to the guy and said, "Listen, you need to delete the stuff," right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think it's common in this day and age. And I'm like, I love that you put that in a song because it's so relatable and it's so real.
Mhm.
And it's the same reason why I like your song Judas, um, which one of the lyrics is God's sheep have the sharpest teeth.
Mhm.
And me being gay,
Mhm.
like, I completely relate to what you're saying because you're basically calling out hypocrisy within certain communities, right? Like, and
Mhm.
that's a really powerful song, I think.
Yeah, I'm really glad that it resonates with you because I also, as you know, a queer person who grew up going to church, there's a lot of icky feelings, to say the least, kind of wrapped up in me and let out through that song, Judas. And I really do love that lyric too, that all God's sheep have the sharpest teeth, because there's so many layers to it, of like the metaphor of a wolf in sheep's clothing, but then also like the metaphor of like God is the shepherd and we are the sheep.
Right.
But then also just the idea of like following blindly like a sheep. You know,
Well,
there's so
also,
much wrapped into it.
but also thinking of a sheep with sharp teeth because we think of sheep as being very like docile animals, right? And I think when you
Hmm.
say sharp teeth, it sort of puts this meanness on something that should be gentle. And I think that's exactly the metaphor of what you're saying. So,
Hmm.
do you remember how that came to you?
Oh, that exact lyric, I'm not totally sure, but that song, Judas, was a singing to myself in the car song. I
Cool.
pretty much wrote that whole song without even touching an instrument. Like, like at least melodically and like with the lyrics, like I had this whole thing mapped out and I was like, I feel these chords, but I haven't even played them yet. Just that was a song that felt more like a haunting than it was really like a writing session. It was just kind of like, and here it is, just like boom.
It's awesome when that happens.
Hmm.
As you know, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. I wish it always happened, but nope. Nope.
Yeah. What do you want to do with your the Natalie Fiddler project as you and I think that's how you referred to it. Like, do you
Hmm.
want to keep releasing more projects? Like you want to keep doing gigs? Like what's coming up next for you?
That's a great question. I really just want to keep making music until I die. Like that's the plan, really.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of have this like soft rule for myself that I would like to put out a record, or like put out records with no more than 5 years in between them and just like see how far I can go. How many records can I put out before I have to break that rule for myself
Yeah.
or something like that. But I love to write and I love to be in the studio. I love to gig. I love to collaborate. And I love to have a project. I love to have like a thing to throw myself into,
Cool.
especially when it's something like this, like my own songs, where it's not just like throwing myself into a random project because I need to do it, but also because it's very fulfilling to me. Um, and so, you know, as long as I'm feeling that feeling and I'm writing music and I'm making it and I'm feeling giddy about it and just like excited to share, like that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think success is a feeling, right? And
Hmm.
for me, if you can do something that gives you that rush of whatever chemical it is when you have fun doing music, like that's what it's all about, I think.
Hmm.
You know, of course, we'd all like to be
Absolutely.
recognized, but, and even money doesn't, when you get money for music, it doesn't feel as good as the feelings, I don't think.
Hmm.
I don't know if you'd agree with that, but
I definitely agree. I think that my approach to what I deem success is very punk, to say the least, of like I
yeah,
just want to make music. I just want to be creative and make good art and I want to surround myself with other musicians that are in the same boat and I just like want to have fun with that. I don't
yep,
care if the only recognition I ever get is like my mom bought my CD. Like that's great. my mom bought a CD that I made that's cool as hell, you know? Like if that's
Right.
all it is, hell yeah.
Well, you have to think not everybody gets to make a CD, right? Like that's,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I'm very lucky to be in, the year 2024 where I get to have a tiny little recording rig and a train case next to me and I
yeah,
could, make a whole DIY record right here in this room if I wanted to.
yeah.
And it's all right here at my fingertips. I have YouTube tutorials and everything is just like one cable away from being put into your DAW and it's just like it's so great.
Well, and your releases are not just the music either, because you have quite a few videos that you've done that are super fun.
Yeah, so for my previous record, the most recent one, Three Man Army, I was actually really, really fortunate to receive the LGBTQ plus Emerging Artist Award from the Music Forward Foundation out in LA. And
Awesome.
the prize was $10,000 to stimulate your musical career. And so I was able to use that funding to really max out that album release. And so there were multiple music videos and um, Spotify canvases and photo shoots and all this stuff that, was really just to supplement the album. There wasn't really like
Yeah,
a career move that was going on other than I'm making a record and here's all this cool stuff. Here's a music video that I've had in my brain and I never thought I could make it because I didn't have the money. And now I do. So here you go.
that's awesome. Awesome. So obviously people watching this channel are, at home songwriting. So it's a lot of independent songwriters. Some are new, some are more experienced. But when you think about everything you've learned, if someone is looking to get started in sort of developing sort of a music
Mm-hmm.
career, and I know career is not necessarily the right word because it's not necessarily a vocation, but
Mm-hmm.
if they're looking to do a project or looking to expand how they're getting their music out there, like what comes to mind if someone comes to you and says, how do you do it? Or what should I focus on? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
asking you the question you asked JoJo, actually.
Yeah, great. Oof. Well, the first thing that pops into my head is don't overthink it. I think, there obviously everyone wants to make a thoughtful and thought-provoking piece of art when they set out to make one. Um, but being able to do that isn't going to happen on the first try. And
Mm,
if you go into it thinking that you're gonna, whip up something amazing without having practiced that craft beforehand, like you are going to set yourself up for failure with having too high of expectations for yourself. Um, and so, like, I think back to when I was first writing and, like, sitting at the piano writing a song because I missed my sister while she was at school. Or, like, even when I, like, first tried just writing a song with a guitar in my hand or something like that, like, I didn't think too much about it. And I was, like, blessed to be a kid who wasn't thinking too much about it. And
yeah.
I think that, like, as we get further into life, and we get older, like, we have more what's the word I'm looking for? We're more aware of ourselves. We have more awareness.
Hmm.
And that can really be honestly the worst thing to happen to artistry because like we want to just do something so perfect and so amazing on that first try and we don't. It's just not how it works.
Right.
So like even if like, your first thing that you start with is just like a tiny little ditty on the piano or like just a little tiny vocal riff, like sit with it, let it rest, let it simmer, and like the all the amazing things that you're feeling and hoping for and wanting to come out of it will come out of it as you work with it more. Like you got to just get your hands dirty and not be afraid to write a song that sucks first.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you, I know you mentioned you could make an album in the room that you're in right now, but you also mentioned you love going to the studio. So so there's a couple questions here. One is present day, do you prefer to record officially in a studio by studio time or, do that, or have you made records at home?
I have like I've made recordings at home. Um I am not a super skilled like producer or
Sure.
like audio engineer. I'm more of like a dick around kind of person when it comes to like
Yeah.
my home studio. And I would love to learn more about it in the future, especially because it would be a lot easier to be able to and cheaper to like record my music at home.
For
But
sure.
I have not done that for like the music that I intend to release. It's more so like demos or like
Yeah.
random little projects that I do for fun at home that I will record myself. But when it comes to like having songs that I want to be an album to release and show to everyone, yes, I will go buy studio time and work with an engineer that knows what they're doing a little
Yeah.
bit more than I do. And I also think that it's really good for me to let up on the reins a little bit. Um, Especially just it's always good to have more ears on your project to kind of check you if you're doing something weird that doesn't
Yeah.
work. Um, love to do weird things that do work, but you know,
Right.
again, having
Right.
another set of ears to check you when you're trying something, it's just it's good to
So
have extra people.
so you mentioned you like to write solo though. Do you feel like songwriting is more solitary for you, or do you like to collaborate, or what is that situation like for you?
I think the big reason that I have gotten into writing by myself is that I'm a bit of a steamroller when it comes to writing. Like I get an idea and I, you know, get a sense of where I think this is going, and suddenly I'm at the end of the song. And like if I write with other people, like they're still back at the first verse and they're like, wait, how did you get there? And it kind of just feels like I kind of just trampled over them. And I I think collaborating is super fun, but I feel like I need to like sit on my hands when I collaborate. I feel like I need to like calm down. Um, and so
It's funny.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
keep
sorry,
going. I want to hear
I
what you
didn't
were
mean to
gonna
cut
say.
you off, but
I want to
um
hear what you were gonna say.
I 100% agree with you because I am like I have a vision, I know what I want it to sound like, here's what I want to say, here's what I want to do.
Mhm,
Collaboration is a much slower process for me. And
mhm,
I've actually had to sort of, you use the term like let up the reins a little bit. When I've collaborated, that's what I have to do because I am a steamroller, sort of like you are as well.
mhm,
Um, and I am of the school of thought that, some people say, well, collaboration makes the songs better. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's some really good songs that are written by one songwriter,
mhm.
and I would say listening to your stuff, you're fine, right? Like you're doing just fine writing on your own. And I think your collaboration part comes in, it sounds like, when you're actually recording and you're letting people play on the songs, but the song itself is, this is Natalie's song, but they're adding something to it, which I think is awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is something I've heard too of like, you know, having extra songwriters or more collaborators can help and make it the song better, but like um it really depends on what your criteria for better are. Um
Right.
and I feel like my inclination is like better means better for money or better for radio or better for, you know, the
Mm,
consumer, right? And that's not why I'm here making Natalie Fideler music.
yeah,
Not like there's anything wrong with writing music for the radio or to make money or to sell or to write a hit or whatever, but like that's
sure.
just not what I'm doing. And
Yep.
if that was what I was doing, I might approach it differently. But
That's a good way to look at it for sure.
mhm.
Awesome. So if people want to check out your music, what's the best way to sort of find you, all of that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think the social media platform that I'm the most active on is Instagram. So find me on Instagram. It's Natalie Fideler Music. And my last name is spelled kind of weird. Fideler. It looks like Fideler. So I meant to say you nailed it by saying my name correctly at the beginning of this.
Okay, because I,
It's
I actually
amazing.
thought when I started this, I thought,
Mhm.
shit, I didn't ask her how to pronounce her name, but I was
No,
like, I'm just gonna say it. She'll
you
correct
nailed
me.
it.
It's all good.
It's Fiddler. It's not as hard as you think it might be. From there on Instagram, I have a link tree in my bio. And that has connections to just about everything else. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, all the stuff. And that link tree also has links to like you scroll down and it'll say like listen to this album. You click on it and you can click on whatever platform you use and it'll just take
Cool.
you right there. You don't even need to type anything. I don't know why clicking feels like so much less work than typing when they're both clicking, but yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, my music is streaming everywhere. If you want to buy it, you can buy it on Bandcamp. Um, you can buy CDs and merchandise on Bandcamp as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, it's been awesome to have you on the channel. Since we're local, I hope we get to meet up sometime in
yeah.
person. It'd be fun to just sit and chat, but I appreciate meeting virtually. It's easier to record this way.
It
So
is. It very much is. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a really great chat.
awesome.
Hopefully, this can be helpful to some of those songwriters out there listening in from the channel.
Oh, definitely. And I think listening to the way that your music for me is a great example of someone who's very, I don't want to use the word experimental, but you're very authentic in what you write about and you use very good lyric structure for songs that like the style of music that you do, you wouldn't expect the lyrics to be as deep as they are, which I think is awesome. I hope that's a compliment because I mean it as a
Yes,
compliment.
yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Natalie, thanks for joining us. And for everybody else, make sure to check out Natalie's music, and we'll see you next episode.